it's another one of those sort of vehicles to do the work. But you have got a few unscrupulous people that have registered themselves as housing association to get the credit, like to get the sort of recognition that people think they're registered and they're not. And then I've come across landlords that have rung me and said, I'm with such and such, and first thing I say is, are they registered? Go and look on the website. They're not, okay, they've given my house back, it's a shit tip. Well, they're not registered, they're not regulated, they're not, they're not under any sort of management rules, So make sure you do your due diligence. So it's fairly easy to get in their little back book. The main thing is you can deliver quickly. You'll not got anything to sell. You can execute under whatever terms they need you to execute. Because what these organisations is any sort of bad press. Like bad press for these guys is a killer. It's just like somebody's head's going to be on the chopping block. So if we're doing disposals, we like them to be discreet and under the radar, because obviously they were bought with taxpayers' money. So if we're selling them, we don't want a lot of kerfuffle about, you're selling social homes, you're making people homeless, you're meant to be the provider of choice, what are you doing? We don't want any of that. Okay, so you can deal source for the sector. So most registered providers want to develop. And if you think of us, if you think of the housing sector, what we are, if you think of us as like massive letting agents, just think of us as huge letting agents. That's our skill is managing tenancies, managing properties. We're not house builders. We're not the Persimmon or the Taylor Wimpey or the Bovis of the world. That's not our skill set. And we're looking for development, but we want somebody else to do the risk. We're risk averse. Because if you're a landlord and you've been a landlord for a long time, your property's generating money, it's just ticking along nicely. There's not a lot of risk. The mortgage rates were low. Everything was easy, should I say? How many landlords are in the room? I'm going to get upset now. I said, we've had an easy time, guys. And, there'll be grant available. So there is subsidy. There's still subsidy for affordable housing because, we want to keep rents low. We want to keep rents low for people to afford. Then we have to provide subsidies to make that work on a business plan case.
Is that the transparent system? Like everybody knows that they have access to grant, or is it a certain fighter with their experience or with their
It's business-led. So each registered provider will have a different appetite to whether they want to pursue grant or not. Okay, so grant is available, but it obviously comes with a lot of hoops, because it's basically free money, isn't it? So they have an allocation, and to keep like a green light, they have to spend their money. If they said, we're going to deliver 500 homes this year, they have to spend that. But if a site with Taylor Wimpey gets held up, or if something goes wrong and they can't secure it, the government sort of allocated that money to go out. And if it stays sat in their bank account, that's really bad for the government because they need to put that money to work. So that will affect their ability to keep their high score. The knock-on, a bit like anybody who's got a bad credit record, a bit like it's a knock-on effect of that. If you don't do what you promised to do for the government, they go, ooh, that's affected your credit score. Okay, you've got to come down here now. What's that going to do for the business of the housing association registered provider? What happens if you've got a bad credit score?
You can't get that. You
can't get loans. You can't borrow money. It's exactly the same. So that is like a no-no. So if they've got, the thing you need to find out is, have they got grant? Have they got grant allocated? And are their schemes progressing? Because if they're not, then that's an opportunity for you to say, oh, I might have something that could work, And they'll go, oh, God, yeah, we've got grants. Yeah. What have you got? What have you got that might work?
How do you find out if they've got?
Ask them. Okay? They'll have a 5-year plan. You can probably find that on the internet, and it will say what they intend to develop. It will say what they intend to sell. It will sell what their management is. It will tell you what their turnover is. It will tell you what their costs are. Because these organisations are meant to be accountable. Yes?
if you want to develop for the council,
What's the minimum requirement capital you must have? Is it 5 million? Is it 10 million? Or anybody?
You have to have a good site.
Yeah, but what's the size?
No money. No money. Forget money. You don't need money. If you've got a deliverable site that you've secured an option on, we'll find the money if it's a good enough site. It's site-led.
Oh, okay.
All right? Is that all I've got? I have to speed up. You'll have to ask me back again for another day. Oh, are they? Okay. Right. So the smaller organisations we were talking about, so there's the big guys that do a lot of development. The smaller organisations want to spend their money on the clients. So there's more opportunity there to do sort of deal sourcing, rent-to-rent type stuff. So you can do a long lease or a let to the local authority. And any sort of organisations, you've got charities, providers, housing associations, local authority. Everybody know what a framework provider is?
No.
Right, so councils buy goods all the time, right? They have to be transparent in how they buy goods. So rather than having to do a full tender every time they want to spend any money, they go through a big tender exercise and then they have a limited section of people that get on the framework. So they might go from 100 support providers down to like 10 preferred partners. That they're always going to give the work to one of those 10. So if you're working with somebody that's on a framework, you can be sure that they've been through a vetting process.
It's just the approval list.
Yeah.
They go on the approval list first before so they haven't got to do on every tender.
Yeah, exactly that. We don't have to do every
Is
tender.
the framework for everything? Or framework
Most
for
things
something?
will have a framework, and they'll split it. So the Gloucestershire one had about 7 different sectors, from rough sleeping, women's support, under 17, over 18, crash pads. And you can bid for all of those. You can bid for some of those. You can bid for none of those.
Is it local to every council or the central government?
The councils will split it as they want, as their political leanings are. Okay.
Is there not a conflict of interest between the care provider providing the housing? Isn't that something that's kind of gone off in Birmingham? Recently, where you've got the same organisation that's providing the care but also providing the housing?
That's working under exempt accommodation. It's perfectly legal, it's perfectly acceptable, and as long as it's done ethically and within the boundaries that it was set up for, it's fine.
Okay.
But yes.
You're talking about supported living oversight, you're talking about.
Yeah. You can run a supported living business with no oversight from anybody. You can set up under a CIC, you can get your homeless people off the street, you can do your rent submission, you can run.
If you search on Google supported living oversight, it'll tell you all about that.
So we buy off the shelf, so you do the development, you do the risk, you find the money, you find the bridging loans, and we'll buy the end deal. But that's good in a way, because if you wanted to go and borrow money and you said, I've got a purchaser already, here's my properties are sold, and here's my land value, and I need this to deliver, then they go, oh, great, you've got no sales risk. Sales risk is always the issue with development of any sort. So if you could eliminate that risk, why not? Package deals, we do package deals where you find the site, you might find a contractor, you come to us saying, we think we can deliver this, and development agreements. So we tend to do a lot of development agreements because they're bespoke. Now, we don't tend to do them with Joe Bloggs. They tend to be with like the Persimmon and the Taylor Wimpey and those sort of people, and we're always arguing about the finer details of what they will and won't include. So there is changes to the system with the levelling up agenda. That's still going to be more so now the Labour government have come in. So grants and low-cost funding. So grants are available via registered providers. So that's the grant I was talking about, is that they will administer it, they will fund it, they will draw down the funding. You've got the SME developers, Levelling Up Home Builders Fund, you've got the Housing Growth Partnership. Now, if you want to do supported housing, Unlimited will offer you grant. So you don't have to pay it back, it's not borrowing, we'll give you a grant. Between 500, you can get a startup grant for £8,000, between £500 and £20,000 if you want to do a supported living business, if you want to set that up. They'll work with you, they'll give you a coach, they'll teach you how to do a social enterprise, how to set that up. Social enterprises, CICs, do not take profit shares. There's no such thing. We take wages. We charge our businesses consultancy fees for the rent setting. And there's other ways you can take money out, but you can't pay shareholders. You don't pay shareholders. Okay? And local authorities often, so I'm working with Tewkesbury, Forest, Cotswold, Gloucestershire. They've come together now as rural districts. They've pulled all their Section 106 funds, and, you know, I'm doing a role there at the minute where I'm securing sites, and I now need some builders. Got any contractors that want to build houses? Because, you know, can't do both of it. We're now looking for builders that want to deliver with our funds that we've pooled collectively. But going back to those old-fashioned council houses, there's reasons for doing that, because registered providers, a lot of the ones, it's easier to buy stock off Persimmon and Taylor. It's just easier for them to do that. It's much harder to do 9 units over here. And whoever they're paying to do the work, the employee costs the same if I do 150 with Persimmon or whether I do 9, you know.
Sir, can you shed a very quick light on, there's one word you have not used the whole presentation, like the affordable, with the open market investors and developer understand, and then they have a site to deliver, say, 20 houses, and 30 local councils.
So you're talking about the rent setting and what makes...
Now, like the affordable side of these projects.
Yeah.
Now, registered providers, when they take on a site, they don't need to worry about that. There's no affordable involved altogether in a site. It's all affordable or it's all social, whatever that
well, it can be either. You can do a cross-subsidy model, but you don't really need to worry about that. All you need to care about, do the figures stack for you. Do the figures stack for your development. If the figures stack for you and you can deliver with a guaranteed exit and no sales risk and will fund your development, why would you not develop for the housing sector? What is bad about that? Why has everybody got to develop for the open market, take a load of bridging, a load of finance, and risk not getting your sales at the end and going bankrupt and having schemes that you can't finish, which is what happens to me. They come back and say, I need somebody to dig me out of a hole, can't finish my scheme. Huh? Grant?
Can we leave the questions till the end? Because
Yeah.
we need to get this out in 5 minutes.
I think I've only got 2 more.
Okay.
I think I'm nearly there. So I'm not going to talk to you at depth about supported housing, okay? But you can see it there. Traditionally, we always did supported housing. Like 20 years ago, that was my role as a housing manager. My role was naturally working with the less well-off, the people out of work, the people that were recovering from drugs and alcohol, the women fleeing domestic. That was the work we did. But the government went, do you know what? We're not happy about this. We want you to borrow money. We want you to borrow money. So the sector went, we can borrow money, but we're going to house people that can pay the rent. We're going to change our business model so that we are not working with the most vulnerable, because that's a risk to our business. So that is why supported housing has got out of control, because the government has driven the housing sector to borrow money. They've cut up the rule book and said, do what you want. And we've said, okay, if we're going to do what we want, we're going to act in the best interest of the business, and we're going to only house people that can pay. So we're going to exclude people in receipt of welfare because we are allowed to do that, because we now have no rules. So that is why your supported housing is at a phenomenal growth rate. It will switch back when the government get hold of the idiots that they are and realise what they've done. They
have more idiots.
Yeah. There's actually 17 different groups that are entitled to extra support. So everything from people at risk of homeless, the young people that we've talked about, people recovering, people that have come out of armed services or have done any military sort of services for us. There's lots. I can make that available. I'll give you a freebie for that, actually, let you have that. And I put on there, why not team up for a children's home and do some good while you're at it. So it's now possible to get up to 14 times the local housing allowance rate. That will depend on the number of suppliers within that district. That is not the same for everyone. That is the maximum. When I was looking it up, ready to come, I refreshed all my figures. Looking up to come to this. Must be non-profit, which is what we've talked about. Can benefit from the exempt accommodation cost-based model, which I think is what you were saying, that conflict of interest. I obviously ran an exempt accommodation based model, cost-based model, that we agreed the cost with the local authority. So they allowed me, you do a rent submission with them and they allow you to put it forward. Some LAs are better than others. So I used to teach my mentors to go and submit an application, find out who the providers are in your district and find out what the rents are that they pay. So you used to be able to get, they pay £230 a week here, £160 a week here. You used to be able to get that. The councils have obviously cottoned on to that now and they won't give you that. They'll say it's business sensitive. So they won't give you, because the idea was if you're setting up, you want to be in the sort of top 25% with the rent pitch, but you don't want to be the most expensive and you don't want to be the cheapest. If you've already got that, you can pitch about right. But they've cottoned on to that, the business people are doing that, so they don't release that. But you can get who the providers are, you can go and ask them what they're doing, you can go and work with them, you can shadow them. Most of these organisations are very open and transparent about what they do. Few caveats: you can't use the enhanced rate to pay for care. You have to have other sources of income. They have to be happy that you've got other sources of income. So like obviously I had my portfolio that was cross-subsidising my supported living. It doesn't in actual practical terms, but on legal, for paper, you have to evidence that you've got other forms of income. Could be challenging and difficult to set up. It's not an easy thing to do. It's been easy in Birmingham because it's been a bit of a wild west here. You know, that's why they've gone bankrupt. Yeah, it has been a little bit of a free-for-all. And it has actually gone through Parliament as a test local authority. There's a lot of talk around the supported housing, how it works, how it doesn't work, pitfalls. Because some organisations were over-inflating the rent, not doing the care. Obviously leaving vulnerable people. They then got struck off. Those people became the landlord's tenants. There's a loophole, whereas if you work with a registered provider, if you find a registered provider to do it, I'm just trying to think, who have you got here? You've got Bromford here, you've got Midland Heart in this area, you've got a few of the big players that might let you work under their umbrella. If you work under their umbrella, then there's no questions asked because they're exempt from any regulation because they're regulated separately. So the council don't need to worry about that. Not the case if you run a standalone model, which is what I was, and I believe that's probably what Vic is doing. And there I am. So I was on time in the end. You were. Wasn't I? Because you told me to hurry up, so I had to get on with it. I have to go in for my tinkle. So have we got time for questions?
Yeah, we've got to go on. We'll have 3 questions. Go, Vinda.
I looked into grant applications with unlimited. Who would you, because that's a skill in itself to get grant up to fill out the forms.
Well, they'll have a.
This was quite simple actually, but would you recommend who would we go to?
Just drop them an email and they'll have somebody within the Midlands that deals with setups. Yeah. That deals with setup in the Midlands, and then they'll give you a business mentor to work with, go through your business plan, what you're trying to do. They're quite a good place to start, but there will be others. There'll be a lot of others in Birmingham that I don't know. There's also a website which I'll let you have, Mark, as well, that gives you all the grants.
I went to a company who was working with them enough, and I did working with the council.
Yeah, there will be all sorts going on. Yeah. I mean, councils are looking for innovative ideas, better ways to solve the housing crisis, new people, new players, so yeah. Yes?
Cool, well, I've got these 200, you've already had too many.
I'm here only for today with this.
I need to ask a question about how to value a supported living house. I mean, if you want to work out the GDP.
Yeah, you're not going to do that. Unless you're signed up with a 30-year lease under a commercial lease for 30 years to a REIT, there is no valuation. They're just a normal residual valuation.
Bricks and mortars.
Well, your value will tell you more about that next week. But yeah.
The guy that does valuations at the back.
Yeah. But I mean, it's termed bricks and mortar, but it's not. Yeah.
In your slide, a couple of slides ago, you said that the providers are moving away from people in receipt of benefits towards working population, because you said it was a risk business model. But if people in receipt of benefits, which include housing allowance, wouldn't you just get that? I mean, how is that a risk?
Yeah, but our rent's 80% of market rent now. So your welfare's here, your rent's here.
Right.
But they've been decoupled. Years ago, if you received welfare, you could afford a socially rented home, like the rents matched. But the government said, no, we want you to borrow money. So we said, right, we need you to get rid of rent control. So we all put our rents up to here
Okay.
to be able to borrow money. So then we need people that can pay rent at here. If you're on housing allowance, you're going to be in arrears from day one. You're just going to be straight into arrears. So we're not going to set you up to fail
Because they can't afford the rent.
because they can't afford the rent. So we won't house you, which we're entitled to do.
Thanks.
Can I have one question? Sarah, just one quick one.
Mm-hmm.
Very brief answer, maybe answer, like homelessness
Yeah,
and the person who has identified care need.
right.
The word that you've used is district provider.
Yeah.
And
Homelessness is a category under housing law all of its own. Care comes under social services and is different. Those two do work together, but if you're a social worker,